My daughter called me at 1 in the morning. "Dad, please open up." "It's freezing out here," she said, her voice trembling. This wouldn't be strange at all if Jasmine hadn't been dead for 4 years. I stood frozen by the front door while the phone kept vibrating in the darkness. Before I go on, I have a quick request. If you're listening to this story on your phone, hit that like button and subscribe. Stick with me until the very end, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story has traveled, because it all started the night my landline rang, just as the old grandfather clock in the living room chimed 1 o'clock, shattering the silence with its solitary toll. I was 68 years old, and at that age, you wake up at midnight to use the bathroom, not because the phone is ringing. I opened my eyes, my heart slamming against my ribs. The room was dim. The light from the bedside lamp barely sketched shadows on the walls, and outside, a drizzle was falling. I could hear the faint tapping of water on the roof. I stretched out my hand, fumbled for my glasses on the nightstand, and sat up clumsily as my knees protested. The phone rang again, faster this time, as if the person on the other end was losing patience. "I'm coming," I mumbled, my voice barely a whisper, crossing the hall toward the living room. I was alone in that house, which was too big now that my wife, Martha, had passed away 5 years ago, and my daughter, Jasmine, 4 years ago. I reached for the white receiver hanging on the wall beside the television. The ringing stopped a second before my fingers touched it, and just as I was about to sigh in relief, it started again, sharp and urgent, right against my ear. I noticed my fingers were shaking. I lifted it. "Hello?" My voice came out raspy. For a few seconds, all I heard was the distant rain, as if the phone line were connected directly to the sky. Then a woman spoke, very softly. "Dad?" I froze. That soft voice, with a slight broken quality at the end of her words, was the same one that used to call out from the kitchen. "Poppy." It was Jasmine's voice. A chill ran down the back of my neck. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to sound rational. "Who are you?" "Dad, it's me," she whispered. "Dad, please open the door for me. It's cold out here." My legs turned to jelly. I thought it had to be a dream, a sick joke, or proof that I was finally losing my mind, as I sometimes feared in my quiet prayers. "Don't play games with me," I said slowly, trying to put firmness into my voice. My daughter passed away 4 years ago. On the other end, I heard a deep, held breath. Then the voice spoke a sentence that broke all my memories in two. "Dad, whenever we get scared of the dark, we turn the light on inside our heart." The world stopped. We had made up that phrase together one night when the power went out, and Jasmine, still a little girl, was crying in the dark. Since then, every time she was scared, I repeated those exact words. I never told anyone that. I never wrote it down anywhere. What? Who are you?" The words barely left my mouth. "Dad, it's Jasmine," the voice replied, with a certainty that hurt. "I'm cold. Please open the door." I looked toward the entrance. From the living room, I could see the outline of the front door frame. I felt something pulling me toward it. My feet started moving on their own, the receiver glued to my ear. "If you are Jasmine," I whispered, "tell me what color your first umbrella was." There was a brief silence, and then she answered without hesitation. "Blue. A tiny blue umbrella you bought me at the Grant Park Farmers Market. We got soaked that day because you forgot to bring your own umbrella. You were so mad at yourself, but I laughed and laughed. I nearly dropped the phone. That memory was too precise. I never told anyone that story. I reached the door. The living room light barely illuminated the wood, while the porch light remained off. I put my hand on the doorknob. "Where are you right now?" I asked, my voice thin. "Right here, in front of the house," she answered. And her voice seemed to come from two places at once, from the receiver, and very faintly, from the other side of the door. "Please open up for me? I can't stand the cold." I slowly hung up the phone and set it down on the small table. My heart was pounding in my temples. I bent down and peered through the peephole. I saw her. Jasmine was standing under the drizzle, soaked, her dark hair hastily pulled up, the gray jacket she wore so often clinging to her body. Her face was pale, but it was the face I knew by heart, the one I looked at every day, in photos, in dreams, and on the headstone at the cemetery. She lifted her head, looking exactly toward the peephole, as if she knew I was watching. Our eyes met through the small glass circle. Her lips formed a faint smile, the smile she used to reassure me when she was a child. I saw her mouth form the words without a sound. "Dad." Even though I didn't hear it, I knew what she said next. "Dad, you still keep my letter behind the photo of your wedding, right?" I took a step back and stumbled against the wall. The letter. A small note she wrote in elementary school and hid behind the frame of my wedding photo with Martha. Only she and I knew that. No one else could possibly know that detail. I looked for something to grab onto. I was breathing in ragged gasps, my chest tight. Outside, that figure, whatever it was, tapped softly on the door with the same rhythm she used when she came home late and was afraid I'd scold her. Tap, tap, tap. "Dad, open up. Please?" The voice seemed to cut right through the wood. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Nostalgia and terror twisted into a knot. How was it possible that a daughter I had buried 4 years ago was standing on my porch? I stood motionless for a few seconds that felt like eternity, and finally, I did the only thing I could think of. I turned the lock. The door creaked, and I opened it just a few inches. On the other side was only the cold, damp night air. I held my breath behind the crack. The wind blew in, smelling of wet earth. There was no one there. Not Jasmine, not anyone. Just the dark yard, the fine drizzle, and the leaves of the yard tree moving slowly. "Jasmine?" I whispered. No one answered. There were no more taps. The phone on the small table had fallen silent. I closed the door again with shaking hands. I threw the deadbolt twice, as if I could lock the fear outside. My chest was burning. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. Maybe it was a dream, I thought. Maybe I'm awake, but my mind is still lost in some nightmare. I went back to the bedroom. The clock kept ticking, monotonously, each second louder than before. I sat on the edge of the bed, with the light on, staring blindly at the closet. I don't know what time exhaustion finally took me. In the morning, the light filtering through the curtain hit my eyes. My head was heavy, my neck tense, and I had a strange feeling, a mix of exhaustion and anxiety. For an instant, I wanted to believe it had all been a long, confusing dream, until I opened the front door. As I turned the lock, the cold morning air rushed in, smelling of damp earth and traces of rain. I lowered my gaze to the porch floor. There were marks of wet footprints on the tile, small, barefoot prints, as if someone had been standing in front of the door for quite a while, shivering. I gripped the door frame tightly to keep from falling. My heart started its frantic race again. The tracks stretched a bit toward the gate and disappeared where the pavement was already dry. On the doorknob, I saw the faint smear of a damp hand that had darkened the wood. I swallowed hard. If it was all a dream, why were the footprints there? Elias, you just need some sleep, I told myself aloud, using my own name like my mother used to scold me. You're old. You think too much. Don't believe everything you see. But the cold dread, the back of my neck, didn't go away. Around 9 o'clock, the gate bell rang. I jumped and looked out the window. It was Mr. Johnson, my neighbor, with the fabric of his sweatpants still rolled down to his waist and his cap tilted. Beside him stood Mrs. Johnson, holding a plastic bag. I went out onto the porch, trying to smile. Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson, I greeted them. Morning, Elias. Everything all right? He replied. I saw your living room light on around 1 last night. Something happened? I said I'd forgotten to turn it off, that it was nothing. Just having trouble sleeping, I added. Don't think so much, Mr. Johnson advised. At our age, if you keep turning things over in your head, you'll end up sick. I brought you some hot peppers from the market, he said, handing me the bag. I thanked them, inviting them in for a moment, though my eyes kept drifting back to the footprints on the porch, already nearly faded by the sun. I sat with them in the living room on the wicker chairs, but I couldn't contain myself for long. Mrs. Johnson looked at me intently. Elias, why are you so pale? She asked. Did something happen? I hesitated for a moment, and, without knowing why, I started talking. I didn't tell them everything, but I told them enough. The call at 1, the voice that sounded like Jasmine's, the taps on the door. It must have been such a strong dream that it bled into your waking life, Mr. Johnson said, trying to reassure me. It happens to me sometimes. I dream my mother is alive, and when I wake up, I can smell her on the pillow. It's just grief. Mrs. Johnson nodded. Pray on it, Elias, she advised. Ask God to calm your heart, and if you need to, go see a counselor to feel more settled. It'll do you good to talk. I smiled. Although deep down I didn't fully believe their words, we exchanged polite farewells. And when the gate closed again, the house returned to silence. The footprints on the porch had completely disappeared, dry as if the night had evaporated. At noon, Marcus, my nephew, arrived. His white car stopped in front of the house. He got out, his light blue shirt perfectly ironed, slacks, and his ever-present messenger bag, his hair slicked back, his face calm, kind, too perfect. Good afternoon, Uncle, he said, shaking my hand. Sorry to drop by without notice. A client canceled, and I took the chance to check on you. I ushered him in. His discreet cologne filled the living room. On the wall, the photo of Jasmine and Julian's wedding stared back at us. She was smiling. He had a hand on her shoulder. Mr. Johnson told me you've been losing sleep, he commented, sitting across from me. What's going on? I hesitated, but ended up telling him the story, this time with more details. The secret phrase, the vision at the door. Julian's face barely changed. Sometimes he nodded, as if taking invisible notes. You're still in a lot of pain, he finally said with the voice he used on television when he gave interviews as a psychologist. It's normal. The brain can create a lot of things when you miss someone and feel guilt. I'm not hallucinating, Julian, I whispered. Those footprints were there. Maybe it was a neighbor or some kid who passed by barefoot, he replied. But the call, in my opinion, is a mix of memories resurfacing. You and Jasmine were very close, and she died unexpectedly. You haven't finished making peace with that guilt. I looked at him, unsure whether to feel offended or understood. Look, Uncle, he continued, I can help you, not as a son-in-law, but as a therapist. Come to the clinic. We'll talk calmly. This doesn't mean you're crazy. It means you don't have to carry this alone. I don't want to be filled up with weird pills, I replied quickly. He smiled. We'll start just by talking. If it's necessary, I'll introduce you to a psychiatrist I respect, but step by step. He pulled out a notebook and wrote something down. I'll see you tomorrow at 3. I've reserved the hour. I nodded, out of obligation. After talking for a while about trivial matters, he left. Before going out, he brushed his hand against the frame of Jasmine's photo. I miss her as much as you do, he murmured. Me too, I managed to say. When he closed the door, the house was filled with that heavy silence, left by someone who seems kind but takes all the air with him. To distract myself, I started organizing the living room bookshelf. I hadn't seriously cleaned it in ages. I took out some old books. Suddenly, a stack tilted, and something fell from the back. It was a cream-colored, slightly yellowed envelope. My heart leaped. I immediately recognized the handwriting on the cover. To Dad. Don't get mad until you finish reading. Jasmine's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, dated 2 weeks before the accident. My daughter's slanted letters filled the page. It began, Dad, I don't know who to talk to. I'm afraid you'll get angry, but I'm more afraid to stay silent. I swallowed and kept reading. Jasmine wrote that she believed Julian was cheating on her, that he was too close to a client, a woman who often came to the office. She said he was coming home late, sometimes lying about his schedule. When she asked him about it, he'd get angry and accuse her of being dramatic, jealous, and suspicious. I'm scared, Dad, she wrote. He's controlling me more and more. He doesn't like me coming to your house often. He says you make me weak, that you make me dependent. He doesn't want me to work outside. He says the house is enough. If something ever happens to me, please don't believe everything Julian says. I love you, Dad. I closed the letter, my hand shaking. The world around me seemed to shrink. It hurt to breathe. Guilt hit me in waves. I had always thought well of Julian, attentive, helpful, always willing to drive me to the hospital. I always believed Jasmine was just too sensitive, too distrustful, and my daughter had left me this sign that I hadn't seen because I had never moved those books. I looked up at their wedding photo. His gesture, which I had always interpreted as love, suddenly seemed like something else entirely. My cell phone vibrated on the small table. A message from Julian. Uncle, 3 o'clock tomorrow? Don't forget. I'll see you at the clinic. I stared at the screen for a long time. I had the voice of Jasmine in the letter, and the voice from 1 in the morning saying, don't trust Julian. It was too much to call it a coincidence. For the first time since Jasmine died, I felt that something was truly wrong, and I could no longer pretend not to see it. I couldn't stay still at home. My daughter's words kept pounding in my head. If something ever happens to me, don't believe everything Julian says. That afternoon, I decided to go to the cemetery. The Atlanta sky was cloudy, but it wasn't raining. The cold, crisp air cut at my face. I took the city bus, then walked through rows of graves to Jasmine's, which was near the back, by a large dogwood tree with sweet-smelling flowers. I stood in front of the headstone. Her name was clearly etched. Below it, the dates of her birth and death, which still hurt like a knife every time I looked at them. "Jasmine," I whispered, "if you're still mad at me, you have every right, but don't torment me like this." I bent down to straighten the faded plastic flowers in the small vase. That's when I saw something at the foot of the grave. A small, old doll with a faded red dress. I recognized it instantly. It was the doll Jasmine had when she was a little girl. The one she said had to live with me in the house because it was safe there. Since she died, I kept it in a memory box in the closet. I had never brought it to the cemetery. My throat closed up. "Impossible," I murmured. I rushed back home. As soon as I entered, I went straight to the bedroom closet. I brought down the plastic box where I kept Jasmine's things, baby clothes, elementary school report cards, birthday cards. I rummaged through everything. The doll in the red dress was gone. I dropped to my knees on the floor, breathing in choked sobs. If I hadn't taken it out, who had been in that box? Julian never cared about those things. Other people didn't have access. Or had it been Jasmine, the one who said on the phone that she was trapped between life and death? A loud knock on the front door made me jump. "Uncle Elias," a young man's voice called. "It's me, Marcus." I suddenly remembered. He had promised that if he ever had work nearby, he would stop by. I opened the door. It was my nephew, my younger brother's son. A denim jacket, black backpack, hair a bit messy. He looked a lot like my brother when he was young. "Hey, Uncle," he smiled. "Sorry to surprise you. I was doing a radio spot nearby and thought I'd drop in." I brought him into the living room. He set down his backpack and sat. His eyes went straight to Jasmine's photo on the wall. "It still hits me to see her there," he said. "It feels like just yesterday. She was teaching me how to take notes for school." I managed a faint smile. "You talk just like your dad," I commented. He chuckled softly. After talking about light things for a while, I ended up telling him what was happening. The 1 a.m. call, Jasmine's voice, the footprints, the doll, the letter. Marcus's face turned serious. "Uncle," he said slowly, "this sounds exactly like the cases I cover on the podcast. Stories that look like normal accidents, but there's something underneath." "You think Jasmine's death wasn't an accident?" I asked. "We have to be careful," he replied. "I don't want to accuse anyone without evidence, but that letter is crystal clear. She suspected infidelity. She spoke of control and manipulation. That's a huge red flag. And Julian is a therapist. He's a good person, educated, helpful," I said, out of habit. "Precisely because he's a therapist, Uncle," he interrupted. "He knows how to manage other people's minds. He knows exactly what to say, so everyone believes him." I sighed a long, heavy breath. "So what do I do?" "Do you have the accident file, newspaper clippings, reports, anything?" he asked. I nodded. I went to the bedroom and came back with a brown folder I kept in a drawer. Photocopies of news articles, the police report, some photos I always hated to look at. Marcus spread them out on the table. His eyes scanned quickly from one paper to the next. "Look at this," he said when pointing to a news item. "It says they found strange skid marks at the scene and that the airbag didn't deploy when it should have." I read it at the time, but I didn't understand it, I admitted. "The police put down possible system failure, and that was it," Marcus summarized. "But in a lot of cases I've investigated, airbags are deliberately disabled." It's a common trick when someone wants a crash to look like an accident. My skin crawled. You think Julian would be capable? I whispered. I didn't say that, he countered. I'm just saying we can't rule anything out. When you have infidelity, control, power, and money, you have motive. I looked at the black and white photo of Jasmine's car, totaled by the side of the road, charred on one side. I felt nauseated. Will you help me find out? I asked very softly. Absolutely, he replied firmly. Case aside, this is for Jasmine and for you. That afternoon, Marcus started calling his contact, friends who worked in local media, an old college friend who had interned at the police precinct. He also searched old news online on his laptop. Here it is, he said, pointing to the screen. The police considered further investigation, but the family didn't file a complaint, and the husband accepted the report. Everything was closed. I remembered those days. I was too devastated to think about anything. Julian handled everything. I just signed papers. It was getting dark when Marcus left, promising to return with more information. If anything happens, call me. Don't be alone, he said before getting on his motorcycle. The house fell silent again. I no longer felt just sadness, but also a rage that burned inside me. Against Julian, against myself, against everyone who convinced me it was a simple tragedy. That night, it was impossible to sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking about the cemetery, the doll, the letter, the brakes, the airbag. I looked at the clock. It read 12:58 a.m., 2 minutes to 1. My heart started beating faster. I looked at the landline phone on the living room side table from the dark hallway. The night before, its ring had sounded like a scream to me. It's impossible, I whispered. It's not going to happen again. The clock chimed 1. Just after, the phone started ringing, slicing through the air. I nearly fell over in shock. My knees were weak, but I forced myself to walk quickly down the hall, breathing raggedly. I picked it up with a cold hand. Hello? Dad? It was Jasmine's voice again, lower, raspier, as if coming from very far away. Why are you doing this to me? I asked, my eyes filling with tears. If you're Jasmine, why didn't you appear when I was almost losing my mind 4 years ago? Why now? On the other side, I heard a sigh. I'm sorry, Dad, she said. I was trapped. I couldn't come back. Trapped where? Between life and death, she answered as if stating something ordinary. I can't leave because there's something unresolved here. Someone is holding me back. Who? I asked, though a name was already stabbing into my head. There were a few seconds of silence, and then, barely a breath, she said, Don't trust Julian. I went mute. I felt the living room shrink. If you're really Jasmine, give me proof, I said, trembling, but firm. Give me a clue. I'm old. I can't handle scares. I need something concrete. She took a deep breath on the other end. Go to the place where I was born, Dad, she whispered. The place where you saw me for the first time. They hid something there. Look for my name. There. I imagined the small clinic where Martha, my wife, had given birth to Jasmine decades ago. I was about to ask for more details, but the call suddenly cut off. There was no dial tone, just the tick-tock of the clock and my own breathing. I gently put the receiver back, leaning against the wall. In my head, the pieces were starting to connect. The strange accident, the letter, the client who didn't feel like part of her family, the small clinic, the possibility of a shady adoption. That night, my fear changed shape. I no longer feared a ghost so much as the possibility that the last 40 years of my life were built on an enormous lie. The next day, I wouldn't just go to the clinic. I would force whoever was necessary to speak. The next morning was gray and cold when Marcus and I got on the city bus that would take us to the old Fourth Ward Clinic on the outskirts of Atlanta, where Jasmine was born. "Are you sure you can handle this?" he asked, gripping the rail. "I've been quiet for too long," I replied. "If I don't do it now, I never will." We got off near a dusty corner and walked down a narrow alley. At the end stood an old building with a faded sign, the old Fourth Ward Clinic. The paint was peeling off. The courtyard was deserted. At the admissions window, there was only a middle-aged woman with a brown shawl and glasses. The name tag on her chest read, Carla. "Excuse me." I approached her. "I'm Elias Vance. My wife, Martha, gave birth here in the 80s. I'd like to see the birth records from that date." She looked up and smiled politely, though the gesture tightened slightly. "Oh, sir, those are very old," she said. "The files from that era are in the back. Not all of them are well preserved. Some were damaged by moisture." "It doesn't matter. I can wait," I quickly replied. She sighed. "Well, you'd better come with me," she said. "That way we can look together." We followed her down a narrow hallway to a small room full of metal shelves overflowing with brown folders, some crooked, all smelling of old paper and mold. "These are from that decade," she pointed out. "But I should warn you, the doctor who attended those births passed away a few years ago. Dr. Walter died. That name created a knot in my stomach. I vaguely remembered him. A man with glasses, a flat voice, quick hands. And we started searching. Marcus took out the folders and read the dates on the labels. After a while, he exclaimed, "I think this is it." It had the exact day of Jasmine's birth. Inside were handwritten forms. One read, Mother, Martha Vance. Father, Elias Vance. In the box for number of babies born, there was a 1, but above it, you could make out the shadow of another number that had been corrected. It looked like someone had written something else and then covered it up. "The ink is old," Marcus said softly. "It gives the impression that it used to say something different." My throat was burning. "What does this mean?" Carla approached and frowned. "I couldn't tell you," she replied. "I didn't work here then, but I can tell you that years ago there were rumors about a doctor who tampered with birth data, something about under-the-table adoptions." "Adoptions?" I repeated, barely audible. "That's what people said," she admitted. "But nothing was ever proven. In those days, these things were buried fast. No one wanted trouble." My head was buzzing. "Was there another birth that day?" I asked. "Another baby?" Carla checked other sheets in the same folder. "It says here there was only one birth that day," she replied. "But look at this." She pointed to a small code in a corner and another strange crossout. "This is really strange," Marcus murmured. "The numbers don't match up." I had to grab the table to keep from falling. "A few years ago," Carla added, "an elderly couple came here asking about births from that time. They said their daughter was adopted here by that doctor. I checked everything and found nothing in the official records, just loose notes like these. They left very disheartened." Silence filled the room. "Could I get a copy of these papers?" I finally asked. "Of course," she replied gently. "Wait just a moment." We left there with several photocopies in our hands. The wind outside was colder. On the bus ride back, I looked at the sheets again and again. The corrected number, the codes, the doctor's signature. The word adoption spun in my head like a trapped fly. "Uncle," Marcus said cautiously, "it's highly probable that something was hidden on the day your wife gave birth." "You think there was another baby besides Jasmine?" I whispered. "I don't want to confirm anything yet," he replied. "But the possibility is there, and the doctor who knew is no longer alive." I stared out the window, watching the houses pass by. Inside me, fear, anger, and an ancient sadness coexisted. How was it possible that I, a father, didn't know if I had brought more than one daughter into the world? And we arrived home as evening fell. Marcus needed to return to his place to organize all the documents and recordings. "Don't open the door to anyone you aren't expecting," he repeated before leaving. "I'll be back tomorrow." When he left, the house seemed even bigger and emptier. I tried to make dinner, but I struggled to concentrate on cutting the vegetables. My mind kept returning to the clinic, Dr. Walter, and that couple who had left with empty hands. As night fell, I turned on all the lights. Normally, I was a frugal man. Tonight, I didn't want a single corner in the dark. A little after 8 o'clock, I heard the sudden screech of brakes outside, followed by the crash of a motorcycle, hitting the pavement, and several shouts. I rushed out to the porch, my heart in my throat. Down the street, neighbors were gathering around someone lying next to a fallen motorcycle. I recognized the jacket and the backpack. "Marcus!" I yelled. I ran as fast as I could, my knees protesting. He was on the ground, pale, with a grimace of pain. "Uncle?" he whispered when he saw me. The brakes went out suddenly. "Did someone call an ambulance?" I asked, close to tears. "It's on its way," one of the neighbors replied. "Looks like he broke his leg, but he's conscious." Marcus squeezed my hand. "Uncle, please," he gasped. "Don't lose my backpack. Everything is in there." "Don't worry," I assured him. "I'll keep it safe." The ambulance arrived. I wanted to go with him, but he insisted I stay. "I'll text you," he said through gritted teeth as they loaded him. "I need you to be okay." I walked back home, the backpack slung over my shoulder, trembling. In a matter of hours, I had discovered that my wife's delivery wasn't what I thought, and my nephew nearly killed himself because his brakes suddenly failed. I left the backpack in my room and sat for a while to breathe in the living room. I changed clothes, took a hot shower to relax my nerves. With my hair still damp, I walked into the dining room, drying my hands with a small towel, and stopped dead. Someone was sitting at the table with their back to me, a woman, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, the gray jacket hanging from her shoulders. On the table were 2 cups of tea, a wisp of steam still rising from one. I stood frozen. The woman slowly turned. It was Jasmine's face, exactly as it was in the last years before she died. No wounds, no blood, just that serene, slightly sad expression. "Dad," she said softly, "sorry for coming in without asking." I didn't know whether to scream or collapse. "Jasmine, is that you?" I stammered. She smiled slightly. "What do you want me to be, Dad?" she asked. "If you want me to be just a dream, I can disappear. If you want me to be real, I'll stay sitting here." Her words were strange, but my head was too full to analyze them. I only saw how she held the cup, her index and middle fingers on the handle, her thumb up, the other 2 fingers supporting the bottom, exactly like Jasmine. She pointed to the chair opposite her. "Sit down. You've been to the clinic. You must be tired." I sat down, as if pulled by an invisible thread. "Did you know?" I asked. "Did you know about the clinic?" "I know a lot of things," she replied slowly. "They lied to you, Dad. They took something from you. And the person you trust has kept lying ever since." I looked at her closely. She was identical to Jasmine, but there was something subtly different about the way she frowned, in her gaze. I thought maybe it was the light, or the years of absence. "I don't understand," I murmured. "What are you? A spirit? A hallucination? Another daughter? I'm old. Don't play with my head." She lowered her eyes for a moment, then looked at me again, her eyes tear-filled. "Whatever I am," she said, "there's one thing then that doesn't change. I'm on your side." She turned slightly toward the door, as if listening for something. "He's not going to stop until he silences you." At that moment, someone knocked hard on the front door. Knock, 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 knock. Julian's voice rang out from outside. "Uncle, it's Julian. Are you home?" I looked at the woman. The chair in front of me was empty. The cup was still steaming. I rose, swaying. I took the cup to the kitchen with trembling hands and nearly spilled it in the sink. I returned to the living room, inhaled deeply, and opened the door. Julian was on the threshold, disheveled, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his face worried. "You took a long time," he said. "You scared me." "I was in the bathroom," I answered curtly. His eyes swept the room as if searching for something. "Are you alone?" "Yes." He entered without being invited. His gaze went from the dining room to the frame of Jasmine's photo. "Did you hear about Marcus?" he suddenly asked. My heart stopped. What happened? I pretended not to know. "He had a motorcycle accident on the corner," he explained. "I drove by a little while ago and heard the neighbors talking. They say his brakes failed. He's at the hospital now." Even though I already knew, my body reacted with a shudder. "Did you see him?" "No, they'd already taken him away," he replied. "The world is funny, isn't it? People who meddle too much in other people's business sometimes get signals to stop doing it." The way he said that chilled me. "What do you mean?" I challenged him. He offered a thin smile. "Nothing specific. I'm speaking generally. Sit down." We sat face to face. He leaned toward me, clasping his hands. "I think your condition is getting worse," he said bluntly. "You hear voices. You see people who aren't there. Now, your nephew has an accident. It could all be related to stress, lack of sleep, confused thoughts." "I'm not crazy, Julian." I cut him off. "There are bad things that go back a long way." "Are you going to start in on Jasmine's accident again?" He sighed. "The police already investigated. Jasmine herself told me not to believe you," I blurted out, my voice rising. His eyes narrowed for a second, but he immediately regained his gentle expression. "The letter you found is from a young woman overwhelmed by relationship problems," he said, "but she's gone. Now there's just you and me. We're family." The word family felt like a trap. "I don't want anyone taking advantage of you," he added. "Your nephew, Marcus, for instance, lives off gruesome stories. He could turn you into another character. Would you like that?" I stayed silent. Part of his speech sounded reasonable. The other part spat poison. "That's why, Uncle," he continued it, staring fixedly at me. "I think the best thing would be for you to move into a retirement community. A good one, with nurses, doctors. I'll take care of all the paperwork. Your assets would be protected. All you'd have to do is rest." I remembered the words of the woman at the table. "He's not going to stop until he silences you." "Let me think about it," I said slowly. Julian sighed and nodded. "All right, but don't take too long. You can't keep going like this." He stood up, smoothing his shirt. Before leaving, he held my gaze for a long time. "I care about you, Uncle," he said in a neutral voice. "I don't want you to get lost." When he closed the door, I stood rooted in the same spot. The word lost sounded more like disappear than disoriented. That afternoon, a message arrived from Marcus at the hospital. A photo of his leg in a cast, his face pale but smiling. "Uncle, relax, I'm not dead. I have to rest, but the mechanic said there was a loose bolt in the brakes, as if someone had deliberately loosened it." My heart surged and dropped. Another message followed. I got the contact information for the couple from the clinic that Carla mentioned, Mr. and Mrs. Riley. They live in a neighborhood nearby. If you feel up to it, you can visit them. I'll help you from here by phone. I texted back, "I'm going." Mr. and Mrs. Riley's house was simple, painted light green, with a small potted garden in front of the door. I took a Tangy there in the afternoon, clutching the folder with the clinic copies in my hand. Mrs. Riley opened the door, tired face, worn headscarf, defensive eyes. "Yes, you are Mrs. Riley?" I asked gently. "I'm Elias. They gave me your address at the old Fourth Ward clinic." Her face instantly tensed. "We already explained everything we knew," she said quickly. "We're not to blame for anything. We're just simple folk. We just wanted a child." "I'm simple folk too," I replied, "and I also just wanted a child. May I come in for a moment?" She hesitated. She looked at her husband, who had appeared behind her, his hair all white, his hands trembling. Finally, they opened the door wider. We sat in the living room. I placed the photocopies on the table and opened the file with my name on it. 40 years ago, I said, my wife gave birth at that clinic. The same doctor who managed your adoption signed my daughter's birth. On my papers, there are erased numbers and strange notes. All I want to know is if the baby they gave you could have anything to do with me. They looked at each other. Mrs. Riley's lips began to tremble. "Manuel," she whispered. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and spoke. "We were desperate," he said. "We couldn't have children. Someone told us about a doctor at that clinic who helped couples who needed babies. We went. We paid. The doctor said the baby was from a poor girl who couldn't raise it, that she would be better off with us. He didn't give names. Never, he denied. He just said, 'Don't ask too many questions.' And we obeyed. Tears escaped my eyes. 'Where is that daughter now?' I asked, my voice cracking. 'Here with us,' Mrs. Riley replied. 'We named her Valerie. She's an adult now, but she's been confused for years about who she is. She knows she's adopted. She always asks about her origins. We don't have answers. That's why we took her to a therapist to help her with her distress.' The name went right through me. Valerie. The client in the recordings had never been named, but her story fit too well. 'A kind, elegant, educated therapist,' Mrs. Riley completed. 'Dr. Julian Hayes.' My chest ached, even though I already suspected it. 'How long has he been seeing her?' 'The first time was about a year after the news broke about the accident involving a well-known therapist's wife,' Mr. Riley explained. 'My wife said she looks so much like Valerie. Since then, she wasn't settled until we took her to that therapist, not knowing he was the widower. She improved at first,' Mrs. Riley said. 'Then she started coming home late from sessions, sometimes soaked, saying she'd stayed to talk. If we asked her about it, she'd get angry and tell us we didn't understand her pain.' I had the image of the woman in the gray jacket, the blue umbrella, the voice on the phone, and the certainty that Julian was at the center of everything. On the way home, the afternoon wind pushed through the taxi window. I was no longer just a sad widower. I felt like a man compelled to fight. That night, at 11 o'clock, the landline rang again. 'Dad?' The female voice sounded exhausted. 'I'm tired. He's forcing me to keep coming. He tells me what I have to say. He says you have to believe him or everything will be ruined.' 'Who is he?' I asked, even though it wasn't necessary. The one who always wears impeccable shirts and subtle cologne, she replied. The one who says you're crazy. My eyes welled up. Then let's stop him from calling the shots, I said. But I need you to be honest with me. Do you want to help me? There was a long silence. Then the voice replied, breaking. I'm scared, Dad. But yes, I'm tired of keeping quiet. We hung up. I picked up my cell phone. My fingers trembled as I typed a message to Julian. I've thought about the community. Come over tomorrow at 11 p.m. with the papers. I want to talk it over alone and sign. I sent the message and took a deep breath. I wasn't going to wait for the night to come for me anymore. I would be the one inviting the monster into my living room. The next day, my stomach hurt all day from sheer nerves. In the afternoon, Marcus called me from the hospital. You're really going to see him tonight? His voice sounded strained. Yes, I replied. I'm sick of lies. Then record everything, he requested. Set your phone to record in a corner. If you can get him to talk about Jasmine, Valerie, the breaks, the adoption, I have a friend on the force who can move fast with that audio. I'll do it, I promised. As evening fell, I tidied the house. I didn't clean. I just removed any objects from the living room that could be turned into weapons in his hands. I placed my cell phone on the bookshelf with the recorder on, camouflaged between two novels. The clock dragged its numbers toward 11. At 11:05, I heard his car engine stop in front of the house. I peeked behind the curtain. It was his usual white car. I went out before he could ring the bell. Come in, I said. Thank you, he replied, with that faint smile. He walked in, placed his briefcase next to the sofa, and looked around as if checking that no one else was there. You look calmer, he observed. I'm glad. Did you bring the papers, I asked. He nodded. He pulled out a perfectly organized folder. Here's the special power of attorney, he explained. If you sign it, I'll be able to handle your entire situation. Community formalities, medical decisions, managing your money. You won't have to worry about a thing. I took the folder, but didn't read it all. I saw words like representation, faculty of decision, assets. If I sign this, I said slowly, I'm handing my entire life over to you. I'm trustworthy, Uncle, he responded kindly. I'm your family. I closed the folder. Let's talk about the truth. Okay? His eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I went to the old Fourth Ward clinic, I blurted out. I saw Martha's birth record. It says we had one baby. But the erased numbers indicate it might have been more than one. And I met a couple who adopted a baby from that same doctor on the same day. Their names are Manuel and Nora Riley. They told me their daughter, also born that day, has been going to therapy with you for years. His face hardened for just a second. His hands, which had been relaxed, tensed on his knees, but his voice remained soft. That was 40 years ago, Elias. The doctor is dead. It's easy for people to mix up stories. The daughter's name is Valerie, I interrupted. They told me she was so distressed when she saw the news of your wife's accident. A woman who looked so much like her that she ended up in your office. You said it yourself. A client with identity problems in the same city. Interesting, right? A heavy silence fell. I know more than you imagine, I continued, my voice trembling but firm. I know about the client who feels strange in her family, who suspects she was adopted from a nearly closed clinic. I know you keep her sessions on a hard drive. I saw you with her in the recording. I know you made her believe you were saving her. A sliver of a smile crossed his face. And then he asked, What conclusion have you come to? That it wasn't a coincidence that Jasmine's car brakes failed, I whispered. That the airbag wasn't broken by chance. That you had motive and means. That you manipulated Valerie, just like you've manipulated me. And that you used her resemblance to my daughter to toy with my heart. If you've already decided I'm a monster, he said, tilting his head, why did you call me? Because there's something you still haven't explained, I answered. You went to great lengths to make me believe I was crazy. Calls, knocks, a doll. Changing places, why? Why all of the theater? His eyes finally went cold. To silence you, he answered without elaboration. To discredit you, on your own, so that everyone looks at you as a confused old man, and no one believes you in case you decide to pry where you shouldn't. Even if it concerns your wife's death? I asked. Death sounds ugly, he said very calmly. I only allowed circumstances to align. A car can fail. A road can be wet. A woman can drive while crying. The police need a clean narrative. I gave them one. I felt my knuckles clench. You're a psychopath, I spat. The world is not kind to people who know too much, he added. Marcus almost joined Jasmine. Too bad his brakes only failed halfway. The buzzing in my ears grew. I was about to throw myself at him, but at that exact moment, I heard the soft, familiar tap on the door from outside. Tap, tap, tap. We both turned. Don't open it, Julian ordered, abruptly standing up. Weird people come around at this hour. My heart sped up. She's here for me, I replied. Not for you. I walked toward the door on shaky legs, propelled by something stronger than fear. I looked through the peephole. There she was, the woman in the gray jacket, hair tied back, eyes bright. Dad, I'm cold. Her lips moved slowly. Open. I turned the lock and opened the door wide. She stepped inside. The cold air from the street rushed in with her. I could feel Julian tense up behind me. Jasmine, I whispered. The woman met my gaze and shook her head slightly. She offered a faint smile. No, she said. My name is Valerie. Time seemed to stand still. Her voice was slightly deeper. Her gestures were almost identical. I felt myself take a step back. Dad, when we were born, we were twins, she said slowly. Jasmine and I. But I was sold to another family. I grew up in a house where I never fit in, feeling like something was missing until I met him. She subtly motioned toward Julian. He was the first one who told me my blood was the same as his wife's. Tears filled my eyes. Why didn't you ever come to me directly? I asked. Why all this with the calls, the footprints, the doll? Because he told me it had to be this way, she replied, her voice breaking. He taught me phrases, memories, secrets. He told me that you had thrown me away to keep my sister, that you deserved to be punished, that you would only believe the truth if you were made to tremble. I looked at Julian. He was pale, but his eyes were burning. You gave her our memories, I said. The phrase about the light in the heart, the hidden letter, the doll. I had access to everything, he replied with disdain. Jasmine's laptop, her phone, her videos. While she slept, I could read and listen. The one who controls the information has the power, Uncle. I just used it. Valerie looked at me, tears streaming. I thought he was saving me, she said. That finally, someone understood my emptiness. He showed me DNA proof, done with Jasmine's toothbrush and a sample of mine. He told me, look, your father chose to abandon you. He chose your sister and left you. I became filled with hatred. That's why I agreed to his plan. To call you at 1, to put the doll on the grave, to sneak in and out of your house, to scare you, everything he told me to. I stepped forward and took her hand. It was warm, very real. "Daughter," I whispered. "You are my daughter too. None of this was your fault." Valerie cried harder. "What you did was wrong, but what they made you believe is worse," I added. "The doctor stole a daughter from you and sold her to another family. And then Julian, who toyed with everyone. We are victims, Dad." "We are," she agreed. That word warmed my chest. "What an emotional scene," Julian interrupted abruptly, his voice sharp. "Father and daughter reunited to accuse me together." He pulled something from his briefcase, a syringe with a clear liquid. "Relax, Uncle," he said. "This is just a sedative. You'll sleep for a good long time. Tomorrow everyone will believe you had a breakdown." An old man, delirious, terrified by voices. "No one will listen to your accusations." He took a step toward me. I backed a bit up and tripped over the rug. So Valerie stepped in front of him. "Don't touch him, she said. "Move aside," he ordered her. "Without me, you'd still be lost, not knowing who you are." "Without you, Jasmine would be alive," she shot back, trembling. Then everything happened very fast. Julian lunged at us. Valerie tried to grab the syringe. They wrestled. I saw the needle flash. I looked around desperately and grabbed the heavy flower vase from the side table. Without thinking, I smashed it against Julian's back with all the strength I had left. The glass shattered. The water spilled everywhere. He lost his balance, hit the edge of the low coffee table, and rolled to the ground near the steps, leading to the small backyard patio. He lay there, groaning, the syringe rolling far away into a corner. I was shaking from head to toe. Valerie clung to my arm, trembling too. Outside, the neighbors started shouting. Someone asked, "Mr. Vance, is everything okay?" In the distance, for the first time in a long time, I heard the clear sound of a siren approaching. That night, for the first time, I felt that Julian was no longer the shadow pulling all the strings behind his smile and his white coat. For the first time, I felt we owned the story. The following days were a blur of police, ambulances, and statements. Julian didn't die. He broke a few bones and had a head injury, but he remained conscious. However, this time, there were too many eyes and ears. Some neighbors had seen him, with the syringe in his hand. And most importantly, Marcus arrived, limping with his cast, accompanied by a young police friend of his. And they brought the audio from the night before, in the living room. They played it on speaker. Julian's voice, talking about loosened brakes, airbags, the manipulation of Valerie, and the plan to make me look crazy. It turned my stomach to hear it. But the police officer nodded, mentally highlighting every fragment. With this, and the papers from the clinic, plus the statements from Mr. and Mrs. Riley, we have enough, he said. He won't be able to hide behind the title. A few weeks later, Julian's name began to appear in all the news, all the prestigious therapist implicated in wife's death and deception of multiple clients. On television, they showed his photo and a small image of Jasmine in the corner. I turned the set off every time I saw it. Marcus utilized his radio contacts and his podcast. He did a special series on the case. I was afraid he would treat it like a spectacle, but when he told me to listen, I put it on. This is not a ghost story, he said in one of the episodes. This is a story about how someone can use the pain of others to control their mind and their life. I listened to his words, sitting in my armchair, with Jasmine's photo in front of me, stroking the frame. The legal process was slow, as always. But this time, I wasn't alone. Every time the police called me to testify, Valerie sat beside me and held my hand under the table. Our relationship didn't heal instantly. At first, we were two strangers united by blood and a twisted history. I sometimes accidentally called her Jasmine. She sometimes looked at me as if wondering if it was all true. One afternoon, weeks later, we sat together on the porch. The Atlanta wind carried the echo of children playing in the distance. "Did you miss someone you didn't know who they were when you were a kid?" she asked suddenly. "Yes," I replied without thinking. "Many times. I dreamt I had more than one daughter. I'd wake up with the feeling that someone was missing, and I'd scold myself, thinking it was just the loneliness." She smiled sadly. "I dreamt of another dad too," she said. "Not my dad, Manuel. It was another voice. It would call me daughter in a way that made my chest ache." My eyes welled up, just like now. "Forgive me," I whispered. "Forgive me for not having looked for you, for not having known you existed." "It's not your fault," she denied. "The culprit was the doctor who stole a daughter from you and sold her to another family. And then Julian, who played with everyone. We are victims, Dad." "We are," I repeated. That word warmed my chest. A few days later, we went to the cemetery together. Marcus insisted on coming, even though he had to lean on a crutch. I brought white flowers, Valerie, a bouquet of purple ones. We stood in front of Jasmine's grave for a long time in silence. "Hello, Jasmine," I finally said, my voice trembling. "Sorry for bringing her so late." Valerie swallowed and spoke softly, as if afraid of waking someone. "Hello," she whispered. "I don't know if I should call you older sister or younger, but thank you. Thank you because through you, all the lies were uncovered. Because of you, I found Dad." The wind rustled the leaves of the dogwood over our heads. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall without shame. "I promise I won't waste this second chance," I murmured. "I can't bring you back, but I can love Valerie as I should have from the start." We placed the flowers together, very close. Marcus took a picture of our backs, the two of us facing the grave, but he didn't say anything. At home, I started changing things. I took Julian's photos down from the walls. I put his photos with Jasmine in a special album. I didn't want to destroy them. I wasn't going to erase the part of my daughter's life she shared with him. I just didn't want his face plastered on my walls anymore. In the living room, next to the large photo of Jasmine in her graduation gown, I put up a new one. Me, Valerie, and Marcus, sitting on the wicker couch, smiling a little awkwardly. If someone looked at the photo without knowing anything, they would just think they were cousins who looked alike. Some nights Valerie stayed over. She told me about her childhood in Manuel and Nora Riley's house, school, the parties where she felt out of place. I told her about Jasmine as a child, how she feared the dark, and how we invented the phrase about turning on the light in your heart. We didn't try to fill all the empty spaces, just to share little by little, so the whole was painful but bearable. Months later, when Julian was officially detained awaiting trial, I woke up one night for no apparent reason. Out of habit, I looked at the clock. It read 12:58 a.m. Seeing that time used to leave my heart pounding in my throat. This time, I just sighed. I left my room and walked down the hall. The landline phone rested silently on the small table. The lights were off, except for a small lamp in the living room. From the guest room, I could hear the muffled sound of a video. Valerie was laughing at something she was watching on her phone. Shortly after, a message chimed in the group chat Marcus had created for the three of us. Family. They were the sounds of life, not of ghosts. I stood in front of the front door, now closed with a single turn of the lock. There were no shadows on the other side, no damp footprints, no soft taps, just the cold night, more friend than foe. The clock chimed one strike, another, and then silence. I smiled. 1 in the morning, again, I murmured. You don't scare me anymore. I went back to my room, but before I did, I stopped in front of the photos on the wall. Good night, Jasmine, I whispered. Good night, Valerie. I turned off the lamp. The house was submerged in a quiet darkness. It wasn't the threatening darkness from before, but one I could make peace with. And for the first time in 4 years, I fell asleep without waiting for a phone to ring at 1 in the morning. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.